This is CS50's Introduction to Programming with Python. My name is David Malin, and this is our week on functions and variables. But odds are many of you, most of you, have never actually programmed before, so let's start by doing just that. Let me go ahead here and open up my computer, and on it a program called Visual Studio Code, or VS Code, which is just a very popular program nowadays for actually writing code. Now, you don't have to write code using this particular tool. In fact, all we need at the end of the day is a so-called text editor, a program for writing text. And heck, if you really want, you could even use something like Google Docs or Microsoft Word. You'd have to save it in the right format, but really at the end of the day, all you need is a program for writing text, because that's what code is, text. Now, within this particular program, I'm going to have the ability to create one or more files via this top portion of the screen. And I'm going to do so by diving right in and doing this at the bottom of my screen. At the bottom of my screen is a so-called terminal window, and this is a command line interface, or CLI interface, to the underlying computer, be it your Mac or your PC or even some server in the cloud. And what I'm going to do here is literally write code and then the name of the file that I want to code, for instance, hello.py. As we'll soon see, any program that you write in Python generally has a file name that ends in .py to indicate to the computer that it's indeed a program written in Python. Now, you'll see here at the top of my screen, I have a blinking cursor, a line 1, which is where the very first line of my code is going to go, and then just a tab that reminds me of the name of this file, hello.py. And without even knowing much Python, I'm going to write my very first program here as follows. Print, open parenthesis, quote, hello, comma, world, close quote, and close parenthesis. And you'll see that at my keyboard, some of my thoughts were finished for me. I only had to type one parenthesis and the other one automatically appeared, and that's just a feature that we'll see of tools like this tool here. Now, even if you've never programmed before, odds are you can guess, infer what this simple program is going to do. And it's only one line. Print, open parenthesis, quote, hello world, close quote, close parenthesis. Indeed, when I run this program, ultimately, it's just going to say hello to the world. And in fact, this is a very famous, perhaps the most canonical program that you can write as your very first program or any other. So that's what I've done here. But on my Mac, my PC, even my phone, I'm generally in the habit, like you, of running programs by double-clicking an icon or just tapping on the screen. But I see no such icons here. And in fact, that's because my interface to at least my current Mac or PC or some server in the cloud is, again, only a CLI, command line interface, which, even though it might feel like it's a step back from the menus and buttons and icons that you and I take for granted every day, you'll find, we think, that it's ultimately a much more powerful interface and incredibly popular to use among programmers in the real world. So to run this program, I'm going to have to use a command. And I'm going to move my cursor back down to the bottom of the screen here, where previously I already ran one command, the command code, which has the effect of opening VS Code in my computer, and then I passed in the name of the file that I wanted to code up. Now I have a chance to type a second command, and you'll see I see a second $sign. Now, the $sign here doesn't indicate any kind of currency or money. It just is the symbol that's generally used to indicate your prompt, where the command line interface wants you to put those commands. Now, the command I can run here is going to be this. I'm going to run Python of hello.py. Now, why is that? Well, it turns out that when I actually write code in a language like Python, it's of course stored in that file, hello.py, but I need to interpret the code, top to bottom, left to right, so that the computer knows what to do. Indeed, at the end of the day, even if you don't really know much about computers, you've probably heard that computers only understand zeros and one, the so-called binary system. Well, if that's the case, then something that says print and parenthesis and quote-unquote hello world is not surely zeros and ones. We have to somehow translate it into the zeros and ones that the computer understands. Now, fortunately, so long as you've installed such a program in advance, there's a program as well as a language called Python. So Python is not only a language in which we're going to write code, it's also a program, otherwise known as an interpreter, that you install for free on your own Mac or PC or some server in the cloud, and you can then run that program, that interpreter, passing to it as input the name of your file, like mine here, hello.py, and then that program, that interpreter, will handle the process of reading it top to bottom, left to right, and translating it effectively into those zeros and ones that the computer can understand. So let's do just that. Let me go back to VS Code here. I already typed out Python of hello.py, but I didn't yet hit enter. And that's what's now going to kick off this command. And hopefully, if I didn't mess any of this up, I should see my very first program's output to the screen. And voila, hello world. So if you too have typed exactly that same code and have executed exactly that same command, you will have written your very first program, in this case, in Python. Well, now let's take a step back and consider what is it that we actually just did and what is it we're looking here on the screen. Well, first and foremost, in most any programming language, you tend to have access to what are called functions. A function is like an action or a verb that lets you do something in the program. And generally speaking, any language comes with some predetermined set of functions, some very basic actions or verbs that the computer will already know how to do for you, that the language really will know how to do for you, and you, the programmer, the human, can use those functions at will to get the computer to do those things. Now, the program in question here, hello.py, is using one function. And you could perhaps guess what it is. That function is, of course, going to be this function print. And that print function, of course, doesn't print some preordained string of text. That is to say, it prints whatever it is you want it to print. And here, too, do we have another piece of terminology in the world of programming, namely arguments. An argument is an input to a function that somehow influences its behavior. The people who invented Python, of course, didn't necessarily know what it is you and I are going to want to print to the screen, so they designed this print function using these parentheses with the ability to take as input some string of text, be it in English or any other human language, that is what you want this function ultimately to print onto the screen. And what is it that the program's ultimately doing on the screen? Well, it's printing, of course. It's showing us hello world on the screen, and that's generally in programming known as a side effect. It can be visual, it can be audio. In this case, it's something that appears on the screen. And functions, therefore, can indeed have these side effects. One of the things they can do as this verb or action is to display on the screen as a side effect something like those words that we wanted, hello world. So that's my first program, and I'm feeling pretty good. Everything worked as planned. I didn't make any mistakes, but honestly, when you're learning how to program, and even once you've learned how to program years later, you're going to make mistakes. And those mistakes, of course, are referred to a term you might already know, which is that of a bug. A bug is a mistake in a program, and they can take so many forms, and take comfort, perhaps, in knowing that over the coming weeks, you're going to make so many mistakes. You're going to have